Hey friends, welcome back to the You're Not Broken podcast. So excited today to have two awesome people on today. I have Monica Molenaar and Anne Fullenweider, who are the co-founder CEOs of Alloy, which is an amazing company. And we're going to weave today into all things like women in business, hormones, midlife, all the good things. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Cool. Do you guys want to start, whoever wants to tag in first, of like how you guys met and the like, this wasn't part of the life plan to do this, but it like came through you. Does anybody want to start on like the origin story?
I could take it. I went into menopause when I was 40 surgically because I had my ovaries removed after a positive BRCA diagnosis. My mother and my grandmother both had breast cancer very early, and so I was always sort of treated as if I had the BRCA gene, but until I was 40, I wasn't willing to do anything surgical. When I did finally make the decision to have my ovaries removed because my grandmother's cancer had spread to her ovaries, so I was more concerned about that. Neither of them had died from it. No one told me I was going into menopause the next day. So I spent the next 5 years really trying to figure out what to do about menopause and how to treat myself best during that time to get back to feeling like a normal person again. After about 6 months, after my surgery, I found my way to a prescription for hormone replacement therapy, but I was getting so many different points of view from every doctor that I went to about what to take and what was okay, and compounded or pellets or generic, or like couldn't make heads or tails of it, and didn't, the information that we all now sort of take for granted, at least in this menopause space, was really not out there. So I happened to meet Anne through our dogs on a vacation one summer 6 years ago. And at the time, Anne was the editor-in-chief of Marie Claire magazine. And once I got on hormone therapy, I did get back to feeling like a normal person again. I actually, that started my entrepreneurial career, and I had started another business. At this point in time when I met Anne, I was kind of thinking about like what next to do, because my role at that business was sort of coming to a close. And Anne was somebody who knew how to create content and speak to women at this, of all ages, basically. But I reached out to her after we had spent a couple of weeks getting to know each other and really going deep very fast, like women can, about like, what are you doing with the rest of your life? Where are you at right now? And I called her up when we got back to work, and I was like, I think you should quit your job and we should solve menopause, because women need the information. Like, the information just isn't there. It doesn't exist. Doctors don't tell the same story. And, we need to kind of figure out like, what is the truth here, and give it to women in a way that they can understand and digest and use, and, action from it. So, she did.
That's an insane.
5 years later. Yeah.
That's an insane story.
Yeah, when Monica and I met, I was, had been editor-in-chief of Marie Claire for 6 or 7 years, I think. My mother had recently died. My then middle school age daughter, who is fine now, but was having some health issues as well. And we had just recently done a story at Marie Claire called "Being a Woman is Killing You," because of all of the lack of research on women's bodies and how that harms women in many different, biggest example being when women walk into the emergency room with a heart attack, they don't present the way that men do. And so I was just really inspired to do something that really would sort of let me dive into the health world and really help women in a more practical way. And, we've been stunned. We didn't even really know when we started the company that we were going to become such estrogen activists, as we like to call ourselves now. And I didn't even realize until like 2 years into starting the company that I actually was in perimenopause. I was like, all these symptoms we've been talking about for 2 years, they seem kind of like I think I've had them for a while. And Sharon Malone, our chief medical advisor, was like, and I don't even need to, I know right now your age where you're saying you're in perimenopause. And I didn't even know before starting the company that was even a thing, that there was something called perimenopause, which is crazy.
I think that's a lot of people's lived experience, is like, they don't, until you like read about it, think about it, because it's not even it's so hidden that like, we don't even know we're in perimenopause. And then you're like, I've been listening to this stuff for like 2 years, and now it's starting to like sink in, because it's like not around for us to even think about.
And also, women don't want to accept it because it's, it sort of has just the whole idea of menopause carries or has carried. I think it's pretty cool to be in menopause, but it up until this point, it has really carried such a stigma of, you're dried up, you're useless, you're sort of at the end as opposed to at the beginning. And, that's something that we really set out to change, that whole idea, because actually, I just turned 50 a couple of months ago. And, there's a very good, it's likely that I and you and, the two of you as well, that we could all be living as long from here forward as we've lived up until this point. Except that now we actually have experience, we have money, we have, we know sort of we're in a totally different place. Like, we're real adults as opposed to the majority of the time that we've been living up until now. We've just been developing, and we were children for so long. We weren't independent creatures. Now we're fully independent and in charge of our lives. And so, this is a really powerful moment to be able to actually take control and say, this is how I want to live my life, from here forward. And this is how I'm going to treat myself. And this is how I'm going to show up in the world. And I think it's really different than any other time of life.
Yeah. I mean, I think that mindset and people seeing that, because, Anne, speak to this for us.
Freezing.
People are like,
Are you freezing?
this is the job I've always done. No, we're good. We're good. But so, like, Anne, you're at the top of the freaking game in your industry, right? And so many women that would be so scary for them to leave that. Like, you don't just show up at the top of editor of Marie Claire magazine, right? Like, you worked so hard to get there, and then you pivoted with I would say, successful pivot, right? But like, what thoughts did you have to overcome of like, this is scary, what am I doing? I'm like successful over here and I'm walking away. Like, give advice to the other people that are of our age where they're changing is so scary.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, first of all, a little bit of naivete definitely helps. I wasn't 100% sure what I was actually jumping into. But also, no, really, I was done learning in my previous job. And on a really personal note, raising a adolescent, now teenage girl, and putting out images of celebrities in fashion and beauty was really starting to feel not right, to be frank. I loved the journalism we did. I loved my career in magazines. I spent my 25 years, like, I wanted to be a magazine editor since I was 16. So I'm really proud of what I did. But I think one of the things that I'm really most proud of is that we started covering women entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, and we started doing conferences around them. Monica actually came to one, being an entrepreneur already before I met her. And I was really inspired by this whole sort of generation of women who were getting to a certain life stage, be it, marriage, dating, prom dress buying, all different sort of stages of life that weren't really, they get there and they'd be like, nah, this isn't working for me. I'm going to create something new and make it better. And that was beyond inspiring. And they also were living in a world of possibility and a world of abundance, really. Like, jump right in, fix the world, make it the way you want it, was really a message that I was really leaning into. Where fashion and beauty, there's some great people, really creative people, really smart people, but it's a world of scarcity, of like, if you don't have this, you're not cool enough. And I really was done with that message. And I really wanted to dive in and really get my hands dirty and also really create something that was going to help people on a practical level. And it's been the most satisfying, gratifying thing I've ever done, not without its moments of panic and, oh my God, what the hell was I thinking? But it's really partly because of that, it's been so rewarding. Like, I'm having a time of my life.
And she doesn't have these moments of panic anymore. We've made it through. I think we've finally developed enough scale, and the market has really sort of come along with us. The last 5 years of us really reaching out to just talking to every single person that we could possibly talk to about menopause, whether it's reporters or investors or doctors or, women. Everybody that we know is in some stage of this menopausal transition. There's, if you're 40 and up, you're in it. And so that's all we talk about. And the world has kind of started to catch up to it, which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not to get too woo-woo, but I definitely believe now that it's been 6 years of doing this, enough things have shown up. I mean, granted, we were looking for them, but if you know what to ask the universe and the universe wants it to happen, I really kind of believe the world was ready for this. I mean, everyone from finding our chief medical advisor to investors to even our lawyer, like just people keep showing up in our path that I don't usually get so woo-woo, but I really think this was meant to happen.
That's awesome. I mean, I think it's perfect timing too, right? Because it's like the telehealth technology is finally good enough. The healthcare system, as we know it, is bad enough. The numbers of women who need help is huge enough. It's like, why didn't this happen earlier? But it's like, because it wasn't ready. We weren't ready with the infrastructure. We weren't ready to know that the fear of hormones is completely unfounded. Like, we weren't, and now it's like, oh my God, here we are.
Oh,
Yeah, and I'll say, I mean, the technology is here. I think, as much as none of us would go through a global pandemic again, that behavior change that happened during COVID was actually very specific, geared towards telehealth, and the idea that you don't have to go wait for 6 hours or, spend 6 months trying to get an appointment and then take a half a day off work and drive 45 minutes and wait for your doctor to be ready for your 7-minute appointment and then get back in the car, realize you forgot your question. Like, none of that has to happen now in order to get lots of different kinds of healthcare. Of course, in-person care is super important for many things as well. People got used to that idea of like, I can just hop on Zoom or on, my messages and my phone and talk to a doctor.
You don't have to, like, to me, I'm like, it's the whole, like, you don't have to find parking.
It's like and women our age, right? Like, we're doing that not just hopefully we're doing it for our own health, but you're also managing that for a parent, a child, a spouse, a partner. Like, you're managing so many other people's medical lives that, I mean, even I, who founded a health company, still put myself at the bottom of the list in terms of which appointments need to be made and who needs to drive or get someone to the appointment, etc.
Yeah, totally.
Which is why with Alloy, you don't even need to have an appointment. You fill out the intake. There's, with menopause, what we really discovered actually is that it's not necessary to have a face-to-face conversation. It's generally not necessary to have a physical exam in order to, I mean, I was in menopause. I didn't have a physical exam with any doctor that I went to assess whether or not I was in menopause or I mean, obviously I had my ovaries out, so it was more obvious, but with so many of the symptoms, like really the first line treatment is by the guidelines, but also really should be menopausal hormone treatment. And then if that doesn't work, then go get a cardiac workup, or then go, have other in-person exams, and we're all for that, but basically sort of general menopause care can really be done in a much more streamlined, efficient way. And in creating this streamlined system, we can expand it to all of the women who just have no access currently.
Amazing. What's the most common story that women who come to the platform are telling you about? Either like access issues with their own doctors or things they want you to keep building and creating. What are some themes that you guys keep hearing over and over from women?
Definitely the first one is that they haven't been the information that they're looking for. A doctor blew them off, or a doctor told them it was part of aging, or a doctor didn't really hear them. And I think, did I freeze? Okay.
Yeah,
and I didn't, and it's going well. And the other thing that we're hearing from people also after they feel better and are on hormone therapy, one of the funniest things we're hearing is like, I still hate my husband.
That's where you come in.
I thought it was my hormones. For a lot of people, it is their hormones, right? Like the amount of women I have, and they're like, I'm not angry anymore, or like my kids don't irritate me as much anymore. But sometimes it's not the hormones.
Yeah. And one of the things that we've sort of been saying from the beginning is like, we're actually selling validation first. So we listen to you. Our doctors listen. And frankly, we only have doctors on the platform who are prescribing, MDs. And women are so used to going to a doctor and being completely dismissed, gaslit, invalidated, their concerns don't matter, or they just really don't have time to be heard. And so, we've come up with a really efficient way to enable women to get all of their questions answered, to be validated, to come to a place that is supportive, where they can, communicate back and forth over an extended period of time without having to make another appointment, or, go through a whole phone tree of, every single person in the office before they would ever get to speak to a doctor again. And, so that's a really smart use of technology to really think about, like, what's the problem? The problem is that women aren't getting access to credible information. They're not getting easy access to credible and, good expertise. And then they're not getting access to the solutions that are going to actually solve the problem for them. And so we kind of created a closed loop where we offer, through so many different ways, we offer credible information, we offer support through our support groups and other ways that we connect with women. And we have, at this point, 20 medical doctors who are prescribers. We're the only platform that we know of that only has medical doctors, and not that there's anything wrong with nurses or nurse practitioners, but our doctors have decades of experience treating women in menopause. I think 99% of them are OB-GYNs, and and we have a pharmacy that delivers, for the most part, or all of our systemic hormone therapy is generic, FDA approved. We do have a branded spray. But we believe that if something's commercially available and FDA approved, then that's the first line treatment. And then we compound what is not commercially available and what's safe, what's proven, what women should have access to, but that's kind of hiding in plain sight and just unavailable to women, like our topical estrogen face cream.
Yeah. One of the things that's so cool is, like, you're not, unless you come and see me or like the people like me, I'm not going to address your vaginal health, your systemic hormones, and estrogen for your face in the same visit, right? Like, those are like 3 separate doctor visits to try to get those things all taken care of, unless you're basically me and the people who are like me, but it's very rare, I would say. And the fact that you guys are like, what do women care about? What are the problems in perimenopause and menopause that are big issues? It's like, we care about our skin. We care about our sex life, and we care about, our body in general. It's like the trifecta of sex, skincare, and hormones is like brilliant. The other thing I really like is, like,
we're the customer. So we're actually creating what we want ourselves. And that has, been, I think, really revolutionary in terms of, like, most businesses are started by people who see a market opportunity, and we saw a problem and a need. And we really understood it so well because we were in it. And Anne and I were in it in different ways. We entered menopause differently. So we also kind of understand all of the different ways that women are really being mistreated at this time of their life, when it should be a fantastic time of life.
Yeah.
And if you treat your menopausal symptoms properly, then you don't have to think about it anymore. You can go off and do the things you want to do, climb mountains or ride your bike or hang out with your friends or whatever, instead of being stuck close to home because you're bleeding so sporadically and so so much that you can't even leave your house, which we've heard a lot. That's not an uncommon.
Yeah, that's not uncommon.
Yeah.
Yeah, about 20%, what I read is about 20% of women in perimenopause will have heavier bleeding. So that's millions of people. I mean, the other thing I love about you guys is, like, I think one way to not advance women's healthcare is to say we don't have data. We don't have an FDA approved product. And it's like, we're not going to get it until we start showing the demand for it. Hopefully then we'll get it. But it's like, you guys are like, what's safe? What can we study? You guys have actually done your own research on the estrogen cream to be like, we want this to be safe, but we have to push. We can't sit back and wait for somebody else to approve something for us. Like, we want solutions. And that's one thing I really respect is, like, you're like, we're going to do the research on estrogen on the face so that we have some more data.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's such a cop out, honestly, to say, like, we don't have the data and therefore we're not going to innovate. And like, we based our estrogen face cream on vaginal cream because I got incontinent accidentally by using, accidentally after 10 years using half my normal dose of estrogen for 3 months and started peeing in my pants, literally. Empty bladder. The minute I thought, like, oh, I have to pee, it was too late. And I hadn't had the genitourinary syndrome of menopause or symptoms of menopause before. And so luckily the CEO of a menopause company and had the knowledge and understanding that this is what it was, and I was able to get a prescription for vaginal estrogen, and it was so effective and worked so quickly that I thought, if I put this on my face, what's going to happen? Because it's skin, and the same thing happens. But there are people who have questioned that, and so we did go off and do a clinical trial and independent with an independent researcher to make sure that what we were saying is true, and it is. So it's safe.
We'll have the data really soon.
Yeah.
Send it
Very
over.
exciting. Oh yeah.
Send it over. I will share.
And I think it's been interesting doing the research because a lot of, that's sort of where being a commercial entity, we also have learned how to raise money, and we've also learned how to be a profitable business. And so we can take that money and do what we want with it and not wait for someone to sponsor or wait to get a pharmaceutical company to be interested or wait to do a giant academic grant. There's certainly not enough money for all the research needs to be done across the board. But it's been really interesting for me, having been in media for so long, to be in this different kind of business and figure out how we want to use our money to further our business and further the health of women, and that those two things are not misaligned.
That's beautiful. The barriers to testosterone are many. What do you guys see that needs to be changed in order to get women the access to testosterone like they have access to estrogen and progesterone?
It's myriad and many. First of all, testosterone is a Schedule 3, Class 3 drug, so it's really difficult to get. There's no nuance, according to the FDA, in terms of dose, in terms of, formulation and sort of how you use it, form factor. So whether it's a gel or a cream or, topically applied or injected, there is no FDA approved dose for women. The prescribing guidelines force you to go in person to a practitioner to get it prescribed, but you have to find a practitioner, a medical doctor who's willing and knowledgeable enough about testosterone to understand. I use it. I used it multiple times over sort of the last 10 years, at different times. The first time I was prescribed it, it was really only the only indication is for libido, which I know you, Kelly, and I have had this conversation before. That's such bullshit. That's the only reason why a woman would take testosterone is to make her want to have more sex is crazy, given all the things that it does. But there are just so many barriers to getting it prescribed. And then also you either need to have it compounded. I had pellets at one point that gave me a super physiologic dose. Luckily, I didn't have the pellets in long enough didn't do it for so long that I had irreversible side effects, which, is really can be dangerous and something that women are not properly informed about. Right now, I use a men's gel and just dose it myself, but that's really difficult to do on a large scale also for women. And so I think the FDA needs to take it off that scheduled list of drugs. We need an FDA approved dose for women, or at least we need information about what a proper dose is. We know what it is, but just on a larger scale, and you shouldn't have to be prescribed in person by a physician.
And then after all that, we still have to educate women that it's safe and good for you and that your body actually made it for decades. And, when you hit menopause, it's not just estrogen and progesterone that your body stops making, but also testosterone. And so, when we first started talking about HRT like 3 or 4 years ago now, our big marketing message really had to be it's safe. Don't worry, it's safe. As opposed to this can do phenomenal things for you. It can give you a much healthier old age. It can increase your health span. All of the wonderful things we talk about all the time, not just solving your symptoms of menopause, which is, by the way, enough.
Right.
But, so then to start talking to women about the safety and efficacy and need for testosterone, I think you're doing a great job of it, Kelly. But starting to talk about hormones and their safety and what they can do for you was an uphill battle. And I think that's another piece. Once we get all the legal and FDA barriers out of the way, there'll still be a little more work to be done.
I love it.
The interesting thing also about the estrogen testosterone ratio is that that changes over time. So if you don't supplement with estrogen, then your body, women don't stop making testosterone entirely, but the proportion changes. And so if you ever wondered like why old women have more hair on their face, it's because they have less estrogen and more testosterone relatively. Most people actually don't realize that men have, men make estrogen as well as testosterone. They just make more testosterone than women do. Women make more testosterone than they make estrogen. But it's all about the balance of, where you are in that kind of cycle. For my personal experience is that the estrogen for women for menopausal symptoms and just your feeling of being like yourself is kind of 95% of it. The testosterone is helpful, but testosterone alone without the estrogen is not where it's at.
Yeah.
You need the estrogen.
And I think we're liberalizing is the wrong word, but like there was such an iron curtain on hormones past 10 years past menopause, and that is lifting now. So those women were like, I can only take testosterone, right? Which is still off label. Mm-hmm. But I think we're liberalizing who can take estrogen now. And so people are having more options to use everything. And anything you want to add on all the hormones?
I mean, just that, like, these are things your body was making for decades. And the idea that there's this fear and panic about actually a much smaller dose than your body has been making, or that birth control pills give you, et cetera, is, like, in retrospect, ridiculous. Yeah. This is really, really safe stuff. And, you have receptors for estrogen throughout your entire body. So it's your brain, not just your menopause symptoms, not just your sex organs, but also your brain, your bones, and your heart. I mean, one of the reasons that this work is so meaningful to me is, my mother was put on hormone HRT, got stage 1, not even stage 1 breast cancer, had a lumpectomy, radiation was totally fine, but never was given hormones again, and died of a heart attack in her early 70s. Not saying I'm an MD, but it does seem like everything I've learned about the protective forces of estrogen on the heart would have been really helpful for her.
Yeah. I mean, I think, as the thought leader who's like, what's coming on this, we're getting over, at least in my bubble, right? There's still many people who are still afraid, but we're moving past the fear, and the conversation about preventative health, if not prevention of disease, preservation of function, is really going to be the next conversation with hormones. I read this article this week looking at how mitochondria use estrogen and testosterone to basically stay functioning mitochondria so they don't die, and then when they die, they kill other mitochondria. And it's like, this is the basics of muscle metabolism that is run on hormones. And I'm like, this is the next conversation of preservation of function. Maybe we'll never say we're going to get it FDA approved for prevention of disease, but we're going to start talking about preserving function, because like Monica said, we probably have 50 years left.
Right. Yeah, and it is FDA approved to prevent osteoporosis, which is also kills women. So at least we got that. Mm-hmm. And then I'm also really looking forward to the sort of convergence of the menopausal hormonal therapy with a conversation with the longevity conversation, because, we already live longer than men, but we don't live as high quality those last, 5 to 10 years. And I think there's really exciting conversations to be had about how we can really have much more fulfilling and active later lives.
Awesome.
I think it's also really important to understand in context the amount and the dose that we're putting back. It's not a full replacement of what you had before. It's just enough in order to, solve the symptoms today and prevent future chronic disease that are the diseases that will really kill your quality of life and you. And for context, I recently had my bloods drawn because I was interested. I use a lot of topical estrogen. I use it systemically. I use it vaginally. My face, so I put it on my hands, on my neck, and also the testosterone. And I was just curious, like, where am I at? And with all of that application, I am still an average menopausal woman in terms of my levels of estrogen. If my level is the scale might be different because I got it. I live in Europe, so I got my test done in Europe, and I think they use a different measurement scale. But just for context, my level was somewhere around 200, and when you're pregnant, it can get into the 70,000, 80,000 range.
Yep.
We've lived many, many, many years of our lives, and with much more estrogen and progestin than what we're giving ourselves back. So the fear is so unfounded, and so it's just really misogynistic, actually, to kind of keep it out of women's hands for no good reason when we have all of the science, we have the data, we have decades of evidence. This has been used, something that's been used since the 1940s and was really accepted and taken for granted until the WHI study in 2002 just, made hormones a poison, and estrogen specifically a poisonous word.
Yeah.
It's really hard once you really start realizing all of the effects of having no estrogen in your body for many years and how available it was. It's really hard not to go down a dark hole of thinking like, wow, there's a lot of people who are benefiting from women not only suffering physically, but being so confused about it. And that's really been sort of troubling. I think that WHI not only set women's health back, but it also developed all these other, or helped perpetuate all these other and grow other markets or other sort of things that are sold to women in the information vacuum that, at best are doing nothing and at worst probably doing a little harm, or at least preventing women from still understanding the benefits of estrogen.
Two of the top pharmaceuticals in this country are statins and antidepressants. And those are two big perimenopause, menopause, I don't say consequences, but downstream effects of low hormones, right? I was talking in Seattle this week and they were like, I was talking in Seattle this week and they were like, what have you learned on your journey, right? Of when you looked at the 10,000 foot view. And I'm like, what I have learned is the best way to control women is to keep them afraid. And it's just a theme that keeps coming up. And everybody in the room was like, right? And then, the feedback afterwards is like, dude, you're right. And I'm like, keep them afraid. We can market to you because you're afraid. We can keep you from doing things because you're afraid. We keep you afraid and we've got some control.
Keep you afraid and hide the access to things probably hiding in plain sight, or, basically cut off your access to the information and keep you afraid. I mean, it's devastating. And it's also, it's really hard not to think of it as a control tool.
It's also really expensive. I mean, look at all of the downstream effects of the medical system, that you then have to pay for all of these, treatments later on. It's devastating to families. It's devastating to kids of older parents who, women who are falling and fracturing. Just the cost of a fracture alone, and a hip fracture. There's a crazy stat that if you're over 50 and you break your hip, you have a 50% chance of dying within 12 months. That's a lot. That's really high. And that can be prevented, totally prevented, or certainly mitigated, at best. Yeah. Obviously, there are other things. We called ourselves alloy because an alloy the definition of an alloy is a combination of elements for strength and protection against corrosion. So we understand that it's not only estrogen that you need, it's other things. Obviously, we were just talking about lifting heavy weights and eating a nutritious diet and all the things that you need together to be your best self. But if you don't talk about estrogen or don't include the hormonal piece, the great diet and the strength training won't do the trick. It's not enough.
Yeah. I love that. Let's talk international for a hot second, because Monica, you're international, you live in Europe. I hear all the time, and I want your perspective, both from a business standpoint and then how you see other places compared to America. But Europe's access to hormones is not great. I'd say Canada sounds worse than America. I talked to a woman in Pakistan, non-existent. In other countries that don't have the resources that even Canada has. Where do you guys see, where are we as an international discussion on perimenopause, menopause? What are the regulatory issues? You can't just hop over to Canada, right? It's not that easy. So what do you guys think when you kind of step back and look at this from an international viewpoint?
I mean, we get requests all the time for people from around the world, not just, the place like Asia, Australia, certainly South America. None of them, no one seems to be getting the right treatment. Doesn't sound like it's better anywhere, but we clearly see that the message is getting out there. I mean, the WHI was the shot heard around the world, right? It really, whatever the situation was in any country you were in, it got worse after that. And I think that we would love to be able to serve everyone internationally. The regulations, vary country by country. And so we will work on it. First, we've got to tackle, the U.S. You've got 55 to 75 million women, depending on perimenopause or menopause, but you've got so many people to treat here. I think we've been really inspired by the work that the UK has done and the movement there. That's really been kind of surprising and wonderful and great that they're so far ahead of us. And so the message got here, but we're really, really working on spreading the word throughout the world.
Yeah, I live in the Netherlands, where it's a socialized medicine, which actually is pretty great. Can be great in the sense that there's really access for everybody, but the problem is that the information that they use is from the WHI. So if you start with bad information and that filters down all the levels, then the sort of the general practitioner that you have to go to first doesn't have correct information. I have given my general practitioner in the Netherlands a copy of Estrogen Matters. I've printed out the menopause 2022 guidelines. I talk to everybody, as you can imagine, here about it. And the interesting thing is that actually this whole conversation that we're engaged in the United States and in the UK really has actually started to spread out into other countries. But the damage from the WHI is really, it's impossible to quantify how gigantic that has been for women. It's maddening, but I do see it changing. And I was recently in of course, every room I go into is filled with women in some stage of perimenopause or menopause, and everybody wants to talk about it. And I sometimes give away vaginal estrogen as a 50th birthday present, for example, like, here, this is what you need. I have coached women on how to get hormone therapy from the GP. So I have people who are ordering M4 to my apartment. I shouldn't say this. Don't repeat this. In New York, and bringing it back to the Netherlands because it works and women are really dying for it. But I do think that the conversation is getting out of the confines of sort of a small group and really kind of is now starting to be heard around the world. And we also know that from Instagram and from other, I was just mentioning that there was a doctor in Australia whose post I reposted from somebody in the UK, and she just happened to be listening to me talking to you on an earlier podcast. This is how the benefit of social media, I think, has been to really make sure that the good conversation also gets out there.
I love it. To wrap up, I want to talk about the other genders. Where are men with this? And I mean that from your experience, both your spouses, your investors, maybe potential employees, maybe partners of women who've been helped by you. What are men saying about this?
Well, certainly my male spouse and Monica's, and my 15-year-old son, probably Monica's sons as well, are probably the most educated men in the United States anyway on this. My son actually said, "Mom, I'm starting a new school. Can you just stop talking about vaginal estrogen on Instagram for like a month?" So, but I've been really encouraged to see men come to some of our events, some of the rooms we go into, the conferences, and some of the most supportive spouses have been really encouraged to see, and really, heartfelt looking for. I just spoke at a spa in Pennsylvania, and a woman came with her husband, and who was a radiologist and had an MD, and was like really there, curious to find out how he could help his wife. And then, of course, on the other side of things, we hear from women who say, like, my marriage has been saved. I can actually, like, not only just have sex with my husband, but also talk to him without being pissed off. And I, enjoy my sex life again, but also my relationships have improved. I think it's funny. And by the way, our first investor was a guy, and he was like nowhere near menopausal age, 29 years old, I think, when we first met him. Just open-minded and part of that generation where, like, every company started is to solve a life stage of some sort or another, male or female. So that's why I think the men are actually coming along quite nicely.
Yeah, I think men are really engaged, especially when it gives some context also about why their female partner may be, acting a little bit funny, or things have changed in their relationship. And I think men generally want women to feel well. And also they are starting to experience their own sort of changes in midlife also, and back to testosterone, there are so many products for men, testosterone products that are available and that do very similar things for them. Help with joint pain, help with mental clarity, help with sleep, help with, exercise and muscle recovery and weight control, which all sort of has to do a lot with your ability to get a good night's sleep and to, be able to actually exercise and do all these things. So there's a kind of equity conversation that I think men are really open to. Once you start saying the word vagina, in public, it loses its stigma. It loses that power of like, this is weird or crazy or ugly or shameful or something, when like half the population has these body parts. The fact that we haven't been able to actually say them out loud up until this point is more strange when you think about it.
Very strange. Super strange. I was editing something for testosterone. I was writing about testosterone, and I threw it into my Grammarly just because it cleans it up real nice. And it said that it couldn't help me because of the sensitive content of my writing. This is this week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not writing erotica yet.
Yeah.
Soon.
And by the way,
Soon.
when we talk about testosterone and erotica, like,
right? How do erotica people
no,
find an editor on Grammarly? But no, I think men
definitely systems.
Men are helpers. They want to help. They want to fix. Once they understand, just the analogy of like, listen, if your testicles fell off at age 50, you'd want a solution too. And then they're like, oh, right? Like it clicks of like, that's what's going on. Not having a period is a symptom or a sign. Not having a period is not actually the thing that's happening.
Right. Exactly.
Sweet.
Yeah, I think that going back to like
is fantastic. I've loved the last 10 years of not like, I don't have to think about tampons. I don't have to think about like, it's great. You're totally freed. So, I was all like, these we're thinking are so terrible are actually are not.
Random fun fact of like 1.6% of placental mammals have periods. Like having a period is actually incredibly rare. And then they don't even know why humans have periods. Most animals just resorb their lining when they don't use it. Wow. Crazy, right?
Crazy. And even fewer of them, right, go into menopause. Just a few of us.
But if you hold them in captivity and you take away their natural predators, they live a lot longer. And then they do. It's interesting data to say like we're so exceptional living past reproduction because we live in fake environments, right? Like we have clean water and clean sanitation. Like we live longer, but when you do that to animals, they live longer too.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which is super interesting. Okay, final words on creating businesses in midlife, in helping women, in doing scary things, in taking hormones.
She glitched.
Final
Should we
thoughts.
go into our final words?
You glitched for a moment, so we didn't hear the question.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say final thoughts on starting businesses in midlife, doing scary things, taking hormones, access that's needed. Any final thoughts?
My final thought is that even though we both took the sort of relative risk of turning upside down our former careers and really jumping into this entrepreneurship and creating a business around it, is that we knew there was obviously a big problem. That's why we took this risk to do it. However, having created the solution and hearing from women in our support groups and by DM and all over the world and the rooms we go into, even us who like knew there was an opportunity to start a business here and women to help, we've been overwhelmed and I've been just sort of flabbergasted by the extent to which this is needed. I mean, the suffering is so vast. I mean, you talk about international, but even in this country, and we get people in our support groups from all over the place, all over the country, all over the socioeconomic strata, all over the, of all different ethnicities. Everyone is suffering and no one has the right information. It is so dramatic. And then, to be helping them is really, really gratifying. It's just like, we want to do it faster and better and get even better at it because there's such giant benefits to feeling like yourself again when you're halfway through your life.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was going to say only about 6% of American women are on hormones.
Yeah.
It's not much. 25% of American women are on antidepressant at midlife, just for perspective.
Well, and 45% of women were on hormones before the WHI. So that's how much damage has been done. And since then, since 2002, the rate of breast cancer has increased. The rate of heart disease, osteoporosis, dementia, diabetes, colon cancer, all of those things have increased. And we know that those things, if you start taking estrogen sooner in your menopausal transition than later, before your cells get diseased and estrogen deprived, that you can really stave off a lot of that chronic disease. But I honestly became an entrepreneur because I went into menopause, and I hadn't worked in a few years. I knew that I wasn't going to have any more kids, so it was time to go back to work. I had been at home with my kids for a few years, and even though I have an MBA from Stanford, I had a kind of non-linear career. I really hadn't found my path until that point, and I wanted to do something different than what I had done before I stopped working, and I couldn't get a job because I was 40 years old, and I was considered too old and I was too old to kind of really start at the bottom, and I was not experienced enough because I had a break in my career to do what I'm doing now. And so the only way that I could get a job and sort of the bar that I was trying to achieve was to create enough experience for myself that I could get a job afterwards and that somebody would pay me to do something, anything. I mean, I was really getting rejected for like $10 an hour internships. That's how bad it was.
Jesus.
And so I just was like, all right, fuck it. I'm just doing this on my own. And I started another business before, as I said, before Alloy, called Seed and Mill, which was a food business. I was actually, my interest was really, and at that point was really in food and in nutrition and sort of the changing way that the American diet, and sort of creating better choices, better options for people. And so that was my initial interest, and also my initial interest in menopause. What's the right diet to eat in menopause? Because I also gained 25 pounds, which I thankfully have subsequently lost. But I was sleep deprived. I was overweight. I couldn't exercise. I was just desperate. And so that's where my interest first started. And then when I met Anne and we started talking about kind of a more holistic menopause solution, I had gotten, everything changed for me when I got a prescription for HRT, but we didn't really think that we could, go into telehealth or create a healthcare company. But what we really knew after doing months of research was, if you're not talking to women about estrogen at this stage of their lives, you're just doing them an absolute disservice. And so we just went for it. And luckily it worked.
It's amazing. I'd say it's working out very well. And cheers to your dog for connecting you. Dogs are amazing animals. They knew what needed to happen.
They really are.
They really are.
Cheers to your dogs. And thank you for finding me. So thanks for spending the hour with us. Hopefully we've inspired people either to look at hormones for themselves or their mother or their partner, or to do crazy wild things like create businesses that solve big problems. So thank you so much for showing up with me today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Great talking to you. Bye.